Let's get a response now from the Republican side. We are joined by the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Senator McConnell, thank you for joining us this morning. You just heard Mr. McDonough there saying it's going to be a non-traditional State of the Union. Non-traditional response?
Well, look, the president is going, I assume, to talk about the future and try to paint a rosy picture where one does not exist. What we'd love to hear from the president is a real plan to defeat ISIL. Instead, he withdrew troops from Iraq, entered into a very bad nuclear deal with Iran. The whole Middle East is in terrible shape. Let me just refer to what Jimmy Carter said at the beginning of the summer when he was asked about the president's foreign policy. He said he couldn't think of a single place in the world where we were better off now than we were when the president came to office. So I'd like to see the president step up here in his last year and lay out a plan for the defeat of ISIL. Is a good starting place.
Will the Senate give him new authority to fight that war? Speaker Ryan is saying perhaps he wants to schedule a vote on that. Will the Senate do that as well?
Well, the problem with what the president submitted for an authorization of the use of military force restricted what he could do. I can't imagine that I would be voting for an authorization for the use of military force that Barack Obama would sign, because the one he submitted for us to take a look at restricted his activities, what he could do based upon conditions on the ground. Look, I don't want to tie the hands of the next president. The next president may want to actually defeat ISIL. And I think an AUMF, an authorization for the use of military force that ties the president's hands behind his back, is not something I would want to do to a new president who's going to have to clean up this mess created by all of this passivity over the last 8 years.
What's the most important piece of legislation you can put on the president's desk this year that he will sign?
Well, look, I think it may be a little bit boring to the public, but we haven't passed every single bill that funds the government, the appropriation bills, since 1994. We've already agreed to what we're going to spend next year. In our continuing effort to end dysfunction in Congress, which we made a huge step forward on in 2015, I think we ought to, on a bipartisan basis, step up to the challenge of getting every single bill that funds the government passed individually, not in a big clump of bills at the end, and get it on the president's desk. That would be noteworthy. It hadn't happened in 2 decades.
Back in 2008, there was bipartisan legislation passed unanimously in the Senate declaring that Senator John McCain was a natural-born citizen, even though he was born in a territory. I know you don't like to get in the middle of the 2016 campaign, but there have been questions raised about Ted Cruz's eligibility to be president. Will the Senate pass legislation declaring that he is also a natural-born citizen?
Well, you're right. I've made a point of staying out of the presidential race. These guys are all running their races as hard as they can in the ways that they think will be helpful to them. I don't think the Senate ought to get in the middle of it.
Even though they did in 2008?
I just don't think the Senate ought to get into the middle of this. These guys will all slug it out in Iowa and New Hampshire, and we'll have a nominee hopefully by sometime in the spring.
Sometime in the spring. But, you know, this has been kind of an extraordinary race, as I know you know. You see Donald Trump and Ted Cruz at the top of the primary field. Senator Cruz has called you a liar. Trump has accused you and Speaker Ryan of gross incompetence. They seem to be tapping into a real anger at the Republican leadership out there in the country. What does it say to you that they're the front runners for the Republican race right now?
It says that we ought to do our work that the American people were elected us to do and let the presidential race play out.
No worry that Donald Trump would put your majority at risk?
We're going to do the job the American people elected us to do, and the presidential candidates will all slug it out, and at some point this year, hopefully, we'll have a good nominee.
You are disciplined, Senator McConnell. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.